So after the success of Toy Story, it was a no-brainer that a sequel would be made. The first movie was very original and introduced a new and relatively inexpensive animation style. As we all know, cheap and efficient production is always something businesses pursue. That's why shortly after the release of Toy Story, Joel Roth, the chairman of Disney Studios, commissioned a sequel to be made. However, this wouldn't be a traditional sequel, but a straight-to-DVD movie. In the late 80s to 90s, VHS and DVD films really began to take off. It was clear that families and consumers enjoyed rewatching their favorite films on home video, and thus many studios realized the potential and untapped revenue of this market. Disney was one of these companies that saw the huge potential in not only mass releasing their movies on home video, but also making original sequels to popular movies that would release exclusively on home media. This idea paid off extremely well, with films like Aladdin, Return of Jafar, making Disney around $100 million in pure profit. Not only did they pay less to create a film sequel, but these movies sometimes made just as much or even more than a movie's theatrical release. That's why around this time, you saw an explosion of direct-to-video Disney sequels, which unfortunately meant that it was unlikely that a theatrical sequel would ever be made. So it makes perfect sense why Joel Roth suggested a straight-to-DVD sequel, as that's how Disney approached most of their sequels at the time. I can't imagine how Pixar's creative team felt at the time. The existence of this film meant that the crew of the original movie would have little control over what happened with the sequel, but it also meant that we would get more Toy Story content in a relatively short amount of time. Now, who do you go to make a simple, straight-to-DVD Toy Story film? For Disney Animation, they had Disney Toon Studios, who made most of their straight-to-DVD films. But obviously Toy Story 2 couldn't go to them unless it was 2D animated. It also could not exactly go to Pixar either, who were busy working on a new major animated film. Well, what if I told you that there was already a studio that was perfect for a lower budget CG film, one that already had intricate knowledge and experience working on Toy Story? I'm of course talking about Disney Interactive, a studio mostly known for their interactive computer games. During the release of Toy Story, Disney Interactive worked on various computer games for Toy Story, like the Toy Story Activity Center and the Toy Story Storybook. Toy Story Activity Center, for example, was a point-and-click experience where players could engage in a series of various mini-games. It was a pretty standard type of computer game for the time, but the thing that interested Disney was the series of animations created for the many Toy Story characters. Not only did this show that Disney Interactive had great understanding of 3D animation, but also that they could create these animations for an absurdly cheap price. So it was decided that this team who worked on the game would be brought in to develop Toy Story 2, leading into the first version of the film. Surprisingly, the story of this Toy Story sequel isn't actually that different from the final film. The movie would explore the toys enjoying their time after Andy left for summer camp. However, Woody damages himself slightly and goes up to the roof of the house out of embarrassment. Unfortunately, the roof is unstable and Woody ends up sliding into a box of items being given away during a yard sale. It's here where Big Al is introduced into the plot. Big Al was a cut character from an earlier version of the first movie, now brought back as one of the major antagonists. Anyways, Big Al steals Woody from the garage sale so he can become a collectible item in Big Al's collection. It's now up to Andy's toys to rescue Woody, who must confront whether or not he truly values being a child's toy or if he'll choose the new life he has been given. Woody's arc in Toy Story 2 is a natural evolution of his arc from the first movie. In that film, Woody valued being Andy's favorite toy and had to learn that his value was not dependent on how much Andy loved him. In Toy Story 2, however, this arc becomes more about what kind of toy he wants to be valued as. When Woody is taken by Big Al, he ends up in a large, high-rise building where he is brought into Big Al's large collection of toys, specifically toys from Woody's Roundup, a popular TV show that featured Woody and other characters. These characters include Bullseye, a horse who in this version of the story would actually talk, the Prospector, a large and round old man, and Senorita Cactus, who in this version of the movie I'm guessing was the original version of Jessie. In the story, the Prospector and Senorita Cactus find out that Woody was once a child's toy, which they are highly disgusted by. You see, these toys see themselves as collector's items rather than toys. This gives them a strange sense of superiority, as collector's items are seen more as prestige objects meant to be traded and displayed rather than being played with by children. The only one who does not believe in this mentality is Bullseye, who has dreamed for years of escaping the high-rise building to become a kid's toy once again. Woody at first wants to leave and return to Andy, but the Prospector and Senorita Cactus manipulate Woody throughout the film. Eventually, even Woody begins believing that life as a collector's item is better than being a children's toy, and he even begins abusing Bullseye as a result. It's only by the end of the movie that Woody must finally choose the kind of toy he wants to be. Buzz's storyline is almost completely identical to the final movie. He's the one that leads the rescue mission to save Woody. However, the major difference is that when Buzz goes to Al's toy barn, he does not meet and fight an exact replica of himself. Instead, he fights the Ultra Buzz 2000, a newer and more advanced version of himself. He also takes out Zurg within the store, which is very different from the final movie. Now you have a pretty good idea on what the story of this straight-to-DVD Toy Story sequel was like. From what I could find, the story actually sounds pretty good and features many of the hallmarks that made Toy Story 2 so successful. That's why Disney executives loved it enough to push for a theatrical release. However, John Lasseter, who by this point had come back to the project, pushed for the film to be reworked because he felt it wasn't as good as it could have been. This led to a production reset where the story and events were altered to fit a new vision while still keeping many elements of the original version. Toy Story 2 is by far the best sequel in Pixar's lineup. It took what worked about the first film and elevated it to a massive degree, showing that, unlike many of the direct-to-DVD sequels, you could still make a great follow-up to a classic animated film without compromising on quality.